So from our last lecture, we are dealing with the chapter called mineral nutrition, and we discussed about the introduction, like why mineral nutrition is required by plants, what are the history of this, what are essential mineral elements, how they can be classified based on their quantity and function, and what are the roles of each and every minerals in life of plants. Along with that, some of its role we discussed also in case of human. Now the important part is we need to discuss about the deficiency symptoms of each and every elements uh, in detail, and then we need to see about the metabolism of nitrogen in case of plants. So basically, when we can say that any element is deficient or less, each and every elements are required in a concentration in case of plants, be it macro element or macro element, they are required in a specific range of concentration. If presence of that element is less than that, then the symptoms we are having is called deficiency symptoms. So there is a new terminology that you should be aware of, that is known as critical concentration. So what is critical concentration? Critical concentration is the concentration of element. If any element is having below that critical concentration, that will retard its growth, or that will retard its physiological activity. Okay, and the symptoms or the signs visible in plants, if any element is present below critical condition, we call them as deficiency syndrome or symptoms. Now, these deficiency symptoms, as we discussed yesterday, can be demarcated as the shape of leaf or the color of leaf or the pattern marked in case of leaf. Okay, so actually, how fast the deficiency symptoms of an element will be visible depend on the mobility of the element. Why mobility? Because in case of plants, if mobility of that element is faster, for example, uh, if we are talking about nitrogen, potassium, and magnesium, the deficiency symptoms were first will be first visible in old or worn out part. Why? Because what happens is plant is storing its extra minerals into the old and worn out part. Nothing is excess good. The way deficiency is harmful for the plant, same way excess of these elements are also harmful for the plants. So what plants does, if there is presence of these elements in abundance, then extra part of these elements it puts into the old and worn out part. Why? Because as it is present in old and worn out part, once the that part is getting away from the plant, for example, if it is stored in a old leaf, and if there is leaf fall, that old leaf will be out of the range of the plant, and plant can get rid of that excess element. Now if in between there is a deficiency symptoms, that the that specific element plants is not able are not able to get by normal means, then what will happen? Then plants have to understand that it cannot sacrifice those elements. So what it has to do, it has to be called from old part to the new part, because for plant if it has to choose between old and new, obviously the new part is more important to the plant. So it cannot sacrifice those elements and it cannot allow those elements to go with the old part. So that's why the elements whose mobility is more, first, their deficiency symptoms will be visible in older tissues. Okay, so not in new, the older tissues. So in older leaves, the biomolecules containing these chemicals will be broken down and it will get mobilized to the younger leaves where they can be utilized. Whereas, if any element is relatively mobile and means they cannot be transported out. So in that case, their deficiency symptoms will be immediately observed in young tissue. Because why? There is no question of visible in old tissue, because anyways, even if you want to mobilize them from old tissue, definitely there is no way to mobilize. So plant cannot get those elements back from old tissue. So what will happen? It will be least bothered about the old tissue, but still the deficiency symptoms will be visible in the young ones. Kindly take a note of this part, and lot many minute questions can be formed from this part. So is it clear to all of you that where the symptoms of deficiency will be visible depends on the mobility of elements. If it is able for mobilization, then the deficiency symptoms will not be first seen in young part, because young parts are saved by mobilizing the elements from old part. But if it is immobilized element, in that case, deficiency symptoms will be directly visible in new part. Is this part clear to everyone? Can one of you give me the green signal so that I can proceed? So Ayushi is giving me a thumbs up, so I am proceeding. Great. So now we will see different deficiency symptoms. So first one is chlorosis. We call it chlorosis because here, as you can see, in comparison with the normal leaf, the chlorophyll content of the leaf is deprived. So obviously that's why it is called chlorosis. Chlorosis is the loss of chlorophyll. Obviously, elements which are very important for production of chlorophyll or its functioning, or they are active helper of the enzymes for chlorophyll formation or cofactors, are the one which is causing chlorosis, their absence. So what are the elements? These elements are nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, obviously, sulfur, iron, manganese, zinc, and molybdenum. Okay, so for necrosis, which is the death of tissues, particularly the leaf tissue, you can see this is the healthy leaf. Slowly and uh, readily the leaf tissue is getting damaged and there is formation of brown spot and yellow patches, then we call it necrosis. Okay, so why this is occurring? In case of necrosis, the tissue itself is getting deficit of these elements. That's why it is getting damaged. Because calcium and magnesium pectate is very much responsible for formation of new cell wall, that is middle lamina. So what is the common what are the common elements which is responsible for both chlorosis and necrosis? Class? It is potassium and magnesium, isn't it? So apart from that, nitrogen, potassium, sulfur and molybdenum, it's like inhibits the cell division if they are in low amount. And nitrogen, sulfur and molybdenum is also, if present in low concentration, it will delay the flowering. Now we will talk about the thing which is very important. You can see that many elements are deficiencies responsible for a single symptoms. For example, if plant is having deficiency of iron, then also it will have chlorosis. If it is having magnesium deficiency, then also chlorosis. And if it is having deficiency of molybdenum, it will have delay flowering as well as chlorosis. So how it is possible for a person to understand which element is deficient? Because for a single symptoms, more than one element is deficient. So this is the way it is done. We require a detailed study to see that different plants are having different types of deficiency. So we need to have an expert to look into it, the matter, and that expert will look into all types of deficiency symptoms, and then only it can be decided. So the coin is having two sides. One is the deficiency, which is caused due to absence or presence of element in low quantity. Similarly, if any element is present in high quantity, then also it is harmful for the plant. For example, manganese. Manganese is a trace element. It is required in micro quantity. If it is in more amount, then obviously it will be detrimental for the plant. So how can we decide that, okay, this is toxic? So any kind of mineral ion concentration in tissue, if it is reducing the weight of plants in the law of 10%. For example, I have a fresh plant of 10 grams. Okay. Or dry weight of a plant is 10 grams. So if due to presence of any element in amount which is more than required, is reducing the weight of that plant into 9 grams. So 10 में से 9 होना मतलब 10% reduction. Then we can say, okay, this element is toxic to the plants. Okay. So many a times it occurs that these elements are correlated. So if one element is present in more amount, it is causing deficiency of other element. For example, if Mn is present in more amount, it will cause deficiency of iron, magnesium and calcium. Why? Because these elements and manganese is responsible for competition in their uptake. Means plant can take them from the soil in a specific amount. So ability of plant to absorb these elements are fixed. So if it is uptaking more amount of manganese, then it has to compromise on the ability to uptake iron, magnesium, and calcium. Okay. So apart from that, manganese also inhibits calcium translocation. So what is translocation? From one part of the plant, when element is transported to another plant, that is called translocation. That's why if Mn is present in more amount, it is causing the deficiency symptoms of iron, magnesium, and calcium. So that's why it's appearing as whitening of the side, and many a times brown spots are also found around the chlorotic veins. So after this, we will discuss about the mechanism of absorption of elements. I request everyone to take a look into the first portion of the book, and take 2 minutes, have a look into this portion, and then let me know. If you don't have any doubts, then we will move ahead. Kindly have a look into the textbook. Post discussion of importance of elements in life of plant, we are now going to discuss about the mechanism of absorption of elements. So how elements are absorbed from the soil, that we are going to learn in this part. So you will know which organ of plant is responsible for absorption of elements from soil. It is the root. From childhood, we are learning that root is going to absorb the elements from the soil. In chapter number 11, two pathways of absorption is there, because from soil it is absorbing water, and along with it, it is absorbing the mineral nutrients. So when any kind of ions are moving inside plant, that is called influx, and if it is moving outside plant, we call it efflux. So the process of absorption will include two phases. So it is having two stages. First stage is the obviously initial stage, and it is the fast process, and where passive uptake of ions are occurring into the apoplast. So what is apoplast? I wish everyone to have their attention here in this image. Can you see this green line? See, in case of movement of ions through this green line, you can notice one thing, that the ions are moving outside the cell wall. It is moving slowly and steadily with my marking, but this green line is moving outside the cell wall. It is never entering into the cell wall. So many a time, although in case of root, no what I can say, water resistant part is present, then also the what I can say, the movement of mineral ions along with water is not that easy. So you can see here in the cell wall, the orange marking is there, and through this marking, when water and mineral ions are moving, we call them as apoplast. In apoplast, the water molecules are never entering into the cytoplasm of the plant cell. Okay, so there are ion channels, and these ion channels are transmembrane protein. They are responsible for movement of this solution, or influx of the solution and its further movement via cell wall portion. Okay, So after crossing Casparian strip of a plant, now you need to follow this blue line. There is the second phase. Here the ions are entering into the cytoplasm of cell, and then from one cell to another cell it is moving via plasmodesmata. That is the cytoplasmic connection. So this process is not a passive process, it is an active process. So apoplast is movement of ions via cell wall ion channels, and in this process the movement is passive. In this process the movement is faster. Second thing is, in this process the water is never entering crossing the cell membrane. It is always outside the cytoplasm. Whereas in the second phase, which is comparatively slow phase, and after crossing a level, it is coming into this second phase or symplast, where the mineral ions are moving through the cytoplasm, and it is the active absorption process. So it requires energy for that. So these are two phases of what I can say, absorption of minerals. One is apoplast and other is symplast. Now, after absorption, now the mineral elements along with water, obviously they are not never ever absorbed dry. They require water to accompany them. The next thing is they are inside the plants. So where they are first reaching? They are reaching to root, and then along with water they are reaching to the every part of the plant body. Like it will reach to leaf, it will reach to flower, it will reach to different parts of the stem. Now, how we know that root is absorbing and then it is reaching to every part? Scientists used radio level isotopes of mineral elements. For example, if you want to see what manganese is doing and where it is going, from where it is absorbing or absorbed by the plant, what we can do is we can use radio level manganese isotope. So what radio level manganese isotope will do? It will be going inside the plant body, and then wherever it is going, if you are using autoradiography method, you can detect, okay, manganese is absorbed from root, and then it will go to this part of plant, that part of plant, then it will spread everywhere. This is what is the beauty. Now, another thing I wish to talk about is we knew that whenever a plant is in danger, the elements which are stored in old part are can be called off to the new part. How this transportation is done? So obviously, this transportation is active transportation, and it is done only in case there is scarcity of a specific element in the plant is observed. But depending on mineral, if the mineral can be mobilized, then only it can be called off. But if it is part of the cell wall component of the old part or anything, and it cannot be mobilized, then we cannot do anything. So translocation of solutes is not occurring from old to new part for every element. So soil is having a very important role in case of plants life. In hydroponic, while it was required to replace soil with liquid, or in aeroponic when there was requirement of replacing soil with air, it was a challenge, because soil is responsible for not only supplying water to plant, it is supplying it desirable minerals. Apart from that, it is porous. The texture of soil is porous. So although plant is embedded into soil and it cannot be uprooted easily, but the porosity of soil is making sure that the root cells also can breathe. There is supply of air. So how we can artificially solve this problem if we have deficiency symptoms? One, two is done by plant. That is true. But consider if any plant is having deficiency of nitrogen in soil, we will sit back and see that okay, chalo, jo ho gaya, ho gaya. How to solve this problem? Class,
Yes, ma'am.
how we can solve the problem of this nutrient deficiency? How we can? So what we do? You never know. We provide
Ma'am,
fertilizer.
by adding fertilizers.
Yes, there are fertilizers called NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We use urea as a fertilizer. Okay, so there are different solutions available. We don't sit helpless if we, with the consultation of specialists, we come to know that plant is having deficiency of this. We cannot allow it to affect our harvest. So obviously we will use some kind of artificial source to supply those nutrients to get rid of this problem. So out of the elements, that is macro and micro elements, most of them are absorbed from soil via absorption of water. But some elements are there which plants obtain by some other means. So four major elements, that is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. We need to know about their source because all other elements than these are obtained from soil. So can you people tell me from where the carbon is obtained by plants? What is the main source of carbon by plants? And what is the main source of carbon for us also? Any idea, anyone? Class. Carbon source of plant.
Carbon dioxide.
It is carbon dioxide. That means from air. And we obtain our carbon from food, mainly carbohydrates. But other than carbohydrates also, when we are uptaking the proteins and lipids, we are also responsible for obtaining carbon dioxide, carbon from our in our body. So what about hydrogen and oxygen? We obtain oxygen,
H2O.
H2O, and oxygen for respiration we obtain by from air also. Okay. Now what about nitrogen? How plants acquire nitrogen? See, the source of nitrogen for plants are air. But the problem is in air it is present in gaseous condition. And the way plants obtain oxygen or they are obtaining CO2, they cannot utilize the gaseous nitrogen. So it has to be converted into the form which can be taken by plants and that form is nitrate, that is NO3 minus. And unless and until it is converted into that form, plants cannot take it. And we know that nitrogen is very much required for formation of protein as well as our nucleic acid. So let us see the last part of this chapter, that is metabolism of nitrogen, how plants are responsible for accepting the nitrogen. So before we go out for the metabolism process, we should have a rough idea about nitrogen cycle. Although all of you studied about it earlier in grade 9 and other classes also. But still I wish to talk about it because it's a very important cycle. So what happens? As I said, the atmospheric nitrogen, it is the main source of nitrogen. Okay, so atmospheric nitrogen is the main source, but problem is plant cannot take it in the gaseous state. So the whole cycle is basing on this concept that plants cannot take gaseous nitrogen. So how to solve this problem? Who is responsible for conversion of this nitrogen into form which can be uptaken by plants? Because it is very important for plants to take it. If plants are not taking it, then we are also helpless. We too cannot do anything because we take all nutrients via plants only. So to solve this problem, we to convert this atmospheric nitrogen into the form of nitrate. The whole hustle and bustle is going on. So how it is done? First of all, this nitrogen is converted into nitrate. How it is done? Is it done directly? No. So basically, I wish to stop sharing it and I want to draw a very, very simple nitrogen cycle, which will be helpful for you to understand very quickly. So it is nitrogen that is in gaseous form and in atmosphere. So there are sources of obtaining them. First source is there is lightning. So this lightning can convert directly some nitrogen into NO3 minus. But there are nitrogen fixer, or we can say that there is a process called biological nitrogen fixation. And this method is called chemical nitrogen fixation. So in biological nitrogen fixation, the symbiotic nitrogen fixers like rhizobium. So rhizobium is a gram-negative bacteria which is responsible to be associated with the nodulous plants like of Leguminosae family like Pisum sativum, that is mutton. So they are associated with the root of these plants and they fix nitrogen. And not only symbiotic, there are non-symbiotic nitrogen fixers are there which are called azotobacter. So what will happen? What they do? Basically, they will convert nitrogen gas into first of all ammonia. that is NH4 minus. So this process is called ammonification. Then this ammonia will be converted into NO2 minus, and then finally it will be converted into NO3 minus. So obviously this is ammonium, this is nitrite, and this is nitrate. Okay, this process is called ammonification. This process is called nitrosification. And this process is called nitrification. Okay, now what will happen? This nitrate is taken up by plants. How they take this? They take this nitrogen in like this nitrate, which is nitrogen which was gaseous in the form, is uptaken by the form which is solid. This one is also solid, and this one is also now solid. So they will be uptaken with the, so it is absorbed by the plants from soil. Now from plants, they are uptaken by animals too. So how they are uptaken? Taken by food. When we eat plants or we are eating other animals which are eating plant, we are getting those nitrogen source. But the problem is when both of these are dying, that is whenever animals are dead or plants are dead, so their dead bodies, so this form, it is present in the form of nitrate. So this nitrate is going to plants, animal, and it is present in their dead bodies, which is in the form of a solid. Now it has to be converted into again gas. So how that is possible? That is possible via bacteria which is known as denitrifying bacteria. So this is done by denitrifying bacteria. And it is converting NO3 minus into N2, and the process is known as denitrification. So this is the concept of nitrogen fixation. This whole process like it's ranging from here to like here to here. The whole process is occurring in the soil, and this rest of the process is occurring in the air. Understood? So it's a biogeochemical cycle which talks about the transition of elements from air to the soil. I request everyone, if possible, note it down or take a screenshot so that you can refer it in future. So we observed the nitrogen like cycle, and we know that for nitrogen we need to compete with microbes. So they are our friends, they are our what I can say, uh, competitors also, because animal cannot take nitrogen. Nitrogen we obtain via plants, so everything is dependent on plants, and plants are competing with microbes to take nitrogen, as well as they are taking help of microbes. You have seen the symbiotic and non-symbiotic nitrogen fixers who are responsible to convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrate. So nitrogen fixation is not cup of tea of everyone. It is observed only in case of some specific microbes, and that's why it's very rare. But apart from that, some amount of nitrogen is fixed by lightning and UV radiation, and nitrogen oxides many a time, if we are having combustion, nitrogen oxides are released by that, especially the factory fuel burning, forest fires, and all these. These nitrogen oxides, they can react with the atmospheric water to form the acid rain. And when acid rain is falling on soil, that is also another way of enriching the nitrogen source of like what I can say, reservoir of solid nitrogen in the soil. So this chart is very simple one. It is present in your textbook also. It is saying about the conversion of ammonia into nitrate. It's simple oxidation method where NH3 in presence of oxygen with the activity of nitrosomonas and nitrococcus converted into NO2 minus, that is called nitrite, and then this nitrite further oxidized to form NO3 minus, that is done under supervision of nitrobacter. So final step is nitrification. Now this nitrification can be further subdivided into nitrosification and nitrification. Whereas conversion of nitrogen to ammonia, this process, biological nitrogen fixation and industrial nitrogen fixation. And also the electrical nitrogen fixation, three of them are converting the source into ammonia. Okay. So we will look now into the we upstairs nitrification. Next step is denitrification. This is occurring with the dead bodies of plants and animals. It is equally important. The way nitrogen fixation is important, same way denitrification is also important, because otherwise all atmospheric nitrogen will be fixed into soil, and then it can be utilized by other microbes and can be deficient for plants to use. So Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus, they are denitrifying bacteria. They did do this work. So biological nitrogen fixation by plant, the key role is played by an enzyme which is known as nitrogenase. So the important role played by nitrogenase is conversion of this gaseous nitrogen into ammonia. So you know nitrogen has a valency of 3. So this triple bond in between 2 nitrogen atom is broken and 3 hydrogen atom is added. So it's a reduction method by which nitrogenase is converting into NH3. So these organisms are of immense importance and we call them nitrogen fixers. So they can be either free living, that means they don't do it for any kind of favor. They are doing it for their own benefit, because by fixing nitrogen they get some kind of nutrients too. These are Azotobacter, Bergerinkea, which are aerobic, and there can be Bacillus and Rhodospirillum. Cyanobacteria is there. We studied in earlier chapters that they have heterocyst formation through which they go for nitrogen fixation. So what do we mean by this word free living? That means they are non-symbiotic. They are like present in the soil and do their nitrogen fixation. They are doing it as per their own wish. They are not in agreement with any plant. Whereas symbiotic nitrogen fixers like rhizobium are staying in the root nodules of a specific plant. For example, Pisum sativum, that is pea plant, is a plant of leguminous family. This rhizobium is staying into the root of these plants, and it is getting shelter and other food substances from the plant. In return, it will fix nitrogen to this plant. Why to this plant? As they are localized in the root of this plant, they will fix nitrogen in the vicinity of that plant. In the area around the root of this plant, nitrogen will be fixed, and that is why plant will be benefited. They don't need to stretch their root to search for nitrogen. You can see these like pimple-like structures or protrusions in the root. These are called root nodules, which shows that rhizobium is growing inside the root and the structure is prepared. So how plants identify the bacteria and bacteria is identifying the plants. Plants are secreting certain chemicals like acetylcholine zone, and this acetylcholine zone is going to attract these bacteria, and bacteria identify, okay, this is my host plant. You try as much as possible. If you want to plant chili plant and you want to rhizobium to fix nitrogen for it, rhizobium will not be able to enter into root of this plant and will not be able to form the root nodule. So some kind of chemical signal specialized is secreted by these plants which will attract the rhizobium species. So alfalfa plant, sweet clover plant, sweet pea, as I told you. There are lentils, that means yellow dal plants, garden pea plants, broad bean, clover beans. So basically these plants, for vegetarian people, we always say that you should eat sprouts, because these dal and others are very good source of nitrogen. So how they are very good source of nitrogen? If they get nitrogen in abundance, so to make this arrangement, to make it nutritious for vegetarian people, the main role is played by bacteria also. So there are some other nitrogen fixers symbiotic which are going for non-leguminous plants also. For example, Frankia. It is fixing nitrogen for ulnus, which is a which is a non-leguminous plant. Now, rhizobium and Frankia is present in soil as their own wish. but they can fix nitrogen only if they are in association with plant. If you take a cross section of this root nodule, you can see here is the root nodule and it is the cross section. It will have a red to pinkish color, and this is due to a hemoglobin like molecule presence, which is called leg hemoglobin or leguminous hemoglobin. The role of hemoglobin is to transport oxygen, but you know that hemoglobin like molecule is present in our muscle and we call it myoglobin, which like store the oxygen in the red muscle, so that at the time of need, that if supply is less than demand, then we can utilize that oxygen. But in plants, they don't have muscle contraction. They don't have transport of oxygen by this means. Plant can take directly oxygen by stomata. Then why leg hemoglobin is required, and that too in case of leguminous plant? That we are going to see next. Before that, I wish to talk about the stages of nodule formation. Uh, so if you consider that these are the root cells and these are bacteria present in the soil particles, initially once the plant is growing, they are present outside the plant. Then plants, that specific plant will secrete some kind of chemicals, and the root hair cells will form a hook-like structure. Through this hook, bacteria will go inside. So this hook is prepared by the root hair. Once the bacteria is inside, they go inside in a line. So this line is called infectious thread. And once they reach into the cortex and pericycle region, they multiply, they form like tumor-like structure, a small protrusion, we call them nodule. Okay, so these like nodule formation is very important because that is the office of this bacteria. It is the place where they can sit and they can produce as much as nitrogen fixation is required. They are doing it. Okay, so nodule must have the facilities for nitrogen fixation. So what are these facilities? The facilities are, they have nitrogenase enzyme, obviously, which is responsible for nitrogen fixation. They have leg hemoglobin. So this nitrogenase enzyme is a iron molybdenum protein, and that's why molybdenum and iron is so much important for plants, because although the nitrogenase enzyme is produced by bacteria, but for its production, it is dependent on plant to supply the elements. So it will convert the nitrogen into ammonia, and you know, in this reaction, the first step is the most critical one, because this is the way the atmospheric nitrogen is fixed into ammonia. So it requires high amount of energy. So this is the reaction of ammonification, that is conversion of nitrogen into ammonia. You can see it will be requiring 8 electron, 8 hydrogen ions, and 16 ATP. So then only from one nitrogen molecule, 2 ammonia molecules are produced. So you can understand this energy is also need to be supplied by the plant. Now, problem is this nitrogenase is highly sensitive to molecular oxygen, and plants are staying in the aerobic condition only. So if there is presence of oxygen in vicinity of these root nodules, nitrogenase cannot work. So the role of leg hemoglobin is to absorb oxygen and provide the nitrogenase an anaerobic condition under which it can work properly. So this is the role of nitrogenase like enzymes function. This is the role of leg hemoglobin. It is acting as a scavenger of oxygen. Now this ammonia is protonated to form ammonium. So this ammonium ion can react with some metal to form ammonium, like calcium, sorry, it can react with some kind of non-metal part to form the thing. For example, ammonium chloride, ammonium nitrate. So such kind of things are formed. And then nitrate. So obviously, finally, the ammonia can be converted into nitrate and which can be uptaken by plants. So ammonia can be used to synthesize amino acids by two ways. One is reductive amination. So how this is done? First one is alpha ketogluteric acid. Alpha ketogluteric acid is an acid without nitrogen. So ammonia, and in presence of NADPH, the full form of NADPH is nicotinamine adenine dinucleotide phosphate, and this H stands for the hydrogen ion. So alpha ketogluteric acid is formed into an amino acid which is called glutamate in presence of glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. And the role of NADPH is to supply hydrogen, which is done. So this NADPH is converted into NADP, and this NH4 is being part of alpha ketogluteric acid. So this is one step. It is called reductive amination. Why? Because ammonium group is added to alpha ketogluteric acid. That's why it is called amination. And why reductive? Because hydrogen is along with it added also. So that is why it is reduction. So reductive deamination, amination, sorry. Next is transamination. That means if this amino acid is a donor amino acid which has ammonium ion present in it, so this is shifted to amino acid receptor. So this is my donor which is converted into a structure without amino acid, and acceptor is finally having amine group, and it is converted into an amino acid. So why we call it is as a transamination? Because here this ammonium, that NH3 plus group is transferred here. So that's why it is called transamination. So that's the process by which the amino acid metabolism is done. And aspargine and glutamine, these are two most important aminoids which are found in plants, and they can be converted into amino acids via some change, and they can get converted into aspartic acid and glutamic acid, and they are a very good source of nitrogen in case of plants. Now, as amides contain more nitrogens than amino acids, so I wish to talk over here. In amino acids, generally only one NH2 group is there. In amides, more than one. So that's why they are transported to other parts of plant via xylem vessels, and that is the way it is supplied to every part of plant. Now I wish to say about a few exceptions. You know that in case of some plants, it is transported not via means of amides. It may be transported in the form of ureas. So they have very high nitrogen and carbon ratio and very good way of transporting nitrogen. So with this we are done. I request every student to see the NCERT exemplar and textbook questions of this chapter. We will discuss that in our next lecture. And next week I will be checking for the question answers of chapter 22 MTG as well as question answers of chapter 15 that we already completed. Okay, so with this I am done. Any questions from your side, class? So we successfully completed chapter number 12. Tomorrow we are starting chapter number 11. Any questions, anyone? So should I consider silence means no? So we will meet tomorrow once again for the lecture and we will discuss further. So for now, bye to all of you. Mark your doubts so that we can discuss in our next lecture. Tomorrow, all of you bring MTG so that whatever pending chapters, doubts are there, we can talk about them. Okay. So bye to all of you. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.